Awesome. So, welcome to this conversation about work. We have Canada, San Diego, Chicago, Connecticut in the house, and New York. Um, and welcome to this conversation / podcast, Amy. So, I was excited to connect with you and then discover some of your writing. I think back in March or April, early when there was like one live event on Zoom every night that people were a part of. And then discovered some of your writing, saw that you decided to leave your job after a year of working, which is way more impressive than my leaving after 10 years. And was excited to see just how you're thinking about it. I'm curious about the rise I see in younger people leaving earlier, what that's all about, and just like what the experience was like for you, and then what led you to write a book. So welcome to this conversation. Amy, do you want to give a brief intro in whatever terms you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. So in terms of introing, it's always hard, I think, to intro myself after I quit my job, because before I used to always say, oh, I work in product, or I'm a product manager, I live in New York City, blah, 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 right? So after that, now I like to say, hey, I'm Amy. I'm currently on a little break, taking a creative sabbatical. I like to write, read, do nothing, meditate, and be in nature. So I think that introing ourselves beyond our work is really important. And I'm sure people here can also resonate with that, just really separating our identity beyond that. But yeah, in terms of like the journey of quitting my job only a year in, so I think we can rewind back to when I decided to take that job. And that was my fourth year in college, the fall before I graduated. And that was a time when I was feeling really, really pressured just to like take an offer. It was in October, and there was like 8 months before we were graduating, but everyone was signing offers and recruiting and all of that. And I had a lot on my plate, and I was wondering like whether I should take a gap year just to travel, because I'd always wanted to do that, or if I should go to grad school, or if I should, do what I saw, mainly what everyone else was doing. And I ended up just taking the easy route, I think, just because it was a really stressful decision, and it was a good paycheck, and it just seemed like the natural thing that made sense. All my friends were moving to New York. Everyone was working in either tech or banking or consulting, and I was just one of them. And that was that. And I had a lot of internal strife around that decision, I think. But then once I made it, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna go back on this. What's done is done, and moved to New York and had a great time overall. And I go into this a little bit in the book, where I was surrounded by these bubbles of the same type of people, right? Pretty much everyone was like me, like from a top college, working in the city, working in these industries, working in these environments. And it was very, very hard for me to meet people beyond these bubbles. And I was feeling quite restless, quite dissatisfied with my position. And I thought that taking another position, another job would be the answer. So I started recruiting pretty much like 6 months into my role. And that clearly was not the answer. That wasn't quite what I was looking for. And it took me really for myself to get entirely out of that environment for me to even recognize that, oh, there are other possibilities and there are other ways of living. And I always knew that, but I never thought it would be a possibility for myself as well. Like I never saw myself in the shoes of those people, just because I was like, oh, like that's great. They're living their lives, they're living their dreams, but that's not for me. So only when I was out of that, I was able to see that that could be for me as well.
Yeah, it seems like growing up you were so good at like everything, right? So you were literally the top of your class. Do you look back now and kind of realize you had this script of like what you were supposed to do? And I found another striking thing. Like you almost had developed this incredible capacity for pain. And you talk about some of the health issues you faced. That's pretty powerful. But yeah, what did you internalize? Like, what was the script you think you were operating on around like what life was supposed to feel like?
Yeah, I always wonder about this because it wasn't so much an external script. Like, yeah, we all hear like, from society and
Right.
from things like, you know, going to a good college is great and getting the job and whatever. But my parents were never like, do this or do that. They always, I mean, expected excellence, I guess. And they really instilled that from a young age. And I guess being good at things or being smart or being at the top of my class, I guess I maybe internalized that expectation of, oh, I have to keep on doing things that will make me look good and will make me stay on top and play that game of prestige because I was so used to being in that prestigious role or like, you know, being valedictorian or like captain of the debate team or things like that. And those little games just, I guess, probably fed into that that whole mindset. And it's interesting you bring up that tolerance for pain because I hadn't even really seen it that way. But now that you say that, I think that's true. And partly I thought it was more so like, my ability to not like suck it up and move on. And maybe that is. And the title of that chapter around health is This Too Shall Pass. And I really internalized that phrase when I was younger. And that probably plays into the whole pain management and pain tolerance. Like, okay, this is painful now, but there is going to be a time where this is it's going to get better. And that's kind of the mindset I think I had almost all throughout until last year. Like, yeah, high school's painful. We like middle school sucked, but it'll get better. High school sucked, it'll get better. College was okay, but it's an emotional roller coaster for many. And almost every semester in college is like, okay, just got to get through finals, just got to get through like the next thing, and it'll get better. And then during work, I was like, okay, when is this going to stop? Like, there's no next step to get over unless I make it happen. So, yeah, I think all of that tying together into really, like, before I was thinking of now, I'm thinking more about like the present and how can I make now better.
Yeah, and you talk about this slow burning cognitive dissonance, which resonates with so many of the stories I've seen from people. It's kind of like this little feeling that has always been there and never goes away, probably amplifies, dulls over time. Sometimes it's more intense. But when do you think that first started to appear and when did it become too much to ignore?
It first started appearing when I was very young, I would say. I think I remember this maybe starting from like ages 11 or 12. And not in the same way, obviously, but something like I remember like flipping through like college books and wanting to apply to top colleges like in middle school, like when I was 11 or 12. And I always knew that it wasn't something that I really wanted, but I should probably just do it. And I always had that dissonance, like, okay, well, why am I going through these actions if it's not really for me? But then I was like, okay, no, this is what I should be doing, so I'm going to keep on doing it. And that really followed me all the way through college. I mean, in college, I had my phases of, joining the business fraternity and getting really involved in like corporate pre-professional things. And then I had a complete 180 and was like, no, I don't want to be anything like that. And got more involved with social entrepreneurship and nonprofit work and startups. So I was constantly going back and forth. And I think my phases in college really represent that cognitive dissonance, because one semester I was in this and one semester I was in that. And only I think when I started building projects of my own and really starting to surround myself with other like-minded people who were more values driven, I started seeing more consistency and more sustainable projects and things that I wanted to be involved in. And obviously I can only say this looking backwards and now it makes sense. But at the time I was just, really trying to grapple with that dissonance.
Yeah. So you talk about right before leaving, and you say, so yes, I quit my job. I have zero plans for what I'm doing. If you ask, I'll only tell you that I'm going to spend some time traveling with my family. But truth be told, that's all I know right now. Don't worry, I'm not here to tell you to quit your job and travel the world. What did your friends and family say with that approach? I know when I left, every single person wants to know your plan. What's the plan? How are you going to pay rent? Are you going to build a business? What's the deal? Are you going to hire employees? Do you know how much money you'll make? How much, or do you have savings? It's pretty crazy how you taking a bold leap unlocks a lot of uncertainty and discomfort in other people. Talk to me about when you made this news public in your friends and family, and what the reaction was like.
Oh man, yeah. So I decided to quit and leave. I think it was around mid-April of 2019. Yeah. So I told my parents and family shortly after, and they were completely on board. They were actually kind of wanting for me to do this for a while. I know, right? I was very surprised. And I think that just goes to show, I don't know why I was internalizing these expectations from them, or thought they wanted me to do something. For them, I think it was more so health related. They really wanted me to focus on my health, and they were just come home, come stay with us. I'm like, okay, well, that's not really what I'm going for here. So their reaction was probably more selfish than anything. But for my sisters were completely on board as well. My middle sister, she actually had a 2-year hiatus post graduation and did her own traveling and gap years and all that. So she very much understood where I was coming from, and I think having her already done that kind of also paved the way for me to know that it was going to be okay, and I could always just find a job like she did right after if all things failed, or if all things succeeded. Friends wise, I didn't really tell many friends until I was 100% sure that I was going to do this, because I didn't really want them to dissuade me or anything like that. So I think I talked to a couple of close friends when I was deciding and got their opinions. And honestly, everyone was so supportive. I'm so grateful for that. And there were questions for sure, as in what's the plan? What are you going to do? And I think at that point I was pretty comfortable saying that I didn't have a plan. And my only plans were actually to go to, or I was taking a cross-country road trip. I knew that for sure over the summer. And then I was I'm going to be traveling around for a couple of conferences. And then I knew that I was going to China in the fall with my family, or with my mom, to visit my family on that side. And so I told people, like, I have my plans pretty much till October. And I told them not to ask beyond that. And they were okay with that. So I think just having, or at least pretending I had the confidence to not have a plan, made them okay with it as well. But yeah, I do think that a lot of people start to recognize or unearth certain anxieties when people do something like this, because one reaction I got a lot of was like, wow, I'm so jealous. Like, I wish I could do that. And then, I wanted to say, like, you can. Like,
yeah. So yeah, I think I experienced that very much in the first few months. Were there any moments that stood out in those first few months of traveling, of kind of just wandering into the unknown? I know I shared a quote from you from Rebecca Solnit, and I think about it a lot. It's that thing of nature which is totally unknown to you is usually what you need to find, and finding it is a matter of getting lost. Does that resonate with what you experienced?
it definitely does. I wish I read her book back then. I think it would have been really helpful. But yeah, for sure. And I think my cross-country road trip, like, I was just in complete nowhere in national parks and in nature and in mountains, and just that environment was also super jarring. Like, I moved out of New York, drove to Virginia, and then like 2 days later I was just on the road. So it was like very quick turnaround with all of that. And because of that, I think, well, one moment stands out. I think where was this? It was in the Badlands National Park in South Dakota. And there's a sign that says, like, beyond this point, self-reliance is key. And you can take whatever path you want, but the whole point is that you get beyond your car and beyond the parking lot after this point. And that really stuck out to me, because it was like, okay, like, I'm on this journey and I'm not sure what path or where I'm going, but what matters is that I'm going beyond the parking lot, right? Like, I'm going beyond the familiar and into the unfamiliar. And I think, the whole point of getting lost is to, like, unearth that unfamiliarity, right? And surrounding yourself in places where you don't know what's going on, and when you don't know what's around you. And that was definitely scary, but I was, I think, intentionally doing that in a way. So
yeah,
I was very much prepared for that, and really wanted to, like, lean in and dive into that. That's not to say I didn't have any second thoughts. Like, I was still applying to jobs at that point, like, continuing that dissonance. So I wasn't like 100% in until I don't even know when. Yeah.
Yeah. At one point, did you decide you wanted to write a book?
That happened in August, so like a month and a half, or a month after I quit. So like I said, I had zero idea what I was going to do, right? And then I came across this book program called the Creators Institute. And I had known a couple people who had done it through Georgetown University. And I had a chat with the professor who ran the program, and very spontaneously decided to do it. And I had a couple of requirements for my time, and I wanted to, like, get to know myself better and really be introspective, and I wanted to do something creative. And those were pretty much the only parameters I put on myself. So once I came across this program, I was like, okay, I've always wanted to write a book. I just didn't know when would be the right time. And like, why not now? I have the time. That's something I do actually have. And that project meets my two requirements for what I want to do. And at the time, I didn't really trust myself to do something completely on my own. So I knew I wanted some external parameters and external accountability. So the program was a really good fit for me at the time.
So we talked about this before others joined, but I think your book unlocked a couple things for me. One, I think it made me realize that um, I really resonated with some things in your book that it just kind of resonated with me, even if I can't relate to the exact situation, which I think is really powerful. And I'm just thinking like, wow, I wish there were like so many more of these type of books of just kind of these small transitions in life and like sharing these journeys. We tend to only expect to have books from like, I was in the bookstore the other day and there are 5 different books of like 78-year-old plus white men billionaires. And it's like, I'm a white dude, but I don't resonate with any of those stories. Like, I resonate much more with what I read from you about just like common life stuff. And then I think the second thing was that I think we think about these writing a book or writing something as like, who's going to want to write it? Nobody wants to hear this. And I think it's probably just a like powerful journey just to go through to get things in that sort of structure. What were the learnings for you through that process?
Yeah, definitely. So I think, I mean, throughout the time, I kind of frame my whole book writing process as not like self therapy for me because I had to really uncover a lot of the stories and expectations and everything that I had internalized, and I had to like go through memories and journals and really try to look for either patterns or lessons or something like that. And that's a lot of what talk therapy and therapy is, and really trying to like distill my experiences into something that even I resonate with, not like let alone other people. So I think I really recognize why people label it as self-help now, the category, because it's like really the author just trying to help themselves like get through something. And that was very much my experience. Like the book was my way of coping with everything, of not even coping, but really like creating something of myself and uncovering those stories and just going through my life, like present, past, future, all of that. And like the book is just the product of, I mean, there are so many words, so many, like the process is what matters over, I think, what I actually created and the person that I become throughout that process. That is really what mattered to me, beyond like any results of the actual thing itself. So like, I'm really glad that you resonated with it. And I think it's always so fascinating because I mean, I've read a lot of, I guess, like self-help, transformation, psychology books, those kind of things. And I never really resonated with a lot of their stories. Like obviously, like I love that whole genre and reading about those things. But I couldn't really find like young people or like women of different backgrounds, different ethnicities, or like mixed people. And I thought that was just something that was lacking from my own personal like reading experience. So I decided to really focus on those points, which were part of my own experiences.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just, I liked reading a book that didn't have a bow at the end. Like you didn't have any answers. You're just like, yeah, the mystery continues and the learning continues. Um, so I thought that was really powerful. So I want to pause here and open it up. If anyone wants to, I mean, introduce yourself, ask Amy questions. If you want to tee up questions for the group, feel free. I'll send it to Antoine first. First question goes to Canada.
Yeah. Hey everyone. So Amy, I have a question for you. I'm a subscriber to your newsletter, and you talk a lot about grief in your newsletter. I was wondering, what did you learn about grief in writing your book?
Mm-hmm. Good question. I think I was going through a grieving process of a lot of things. And I think we all were going through this collective grieving process, especially like since this whole pandemic started. But even before that, I was going through my own personal process with like a life that I thought I was going to have, and a life that I was on, and that path and that blueprint I created for myself. So I think grief has to do with loss and learning how to accept and let go of things, right? And even though I knew that life wasn't for me and I didn't want it, it was still a process to really accept that and let go of that. And I think, there are so many different parts of yourself, right? So like part of me, I'm sure, like wanted that, or at least at one point in my life wanted that lifestyle. And even like being like surrounded by my friends in New York in my apartment, and like just that whole life, I had to let go of that, and probably like went through every stage in the cycle of grief like multiple times, like all around or like all at once. So I think we're all learning how to like let go of expectations and what we think that was probably going to happen. Was very much the case for me. Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Any other questions coming up for people?
Yeah. This is Deepu. So one question I have is, what did you feel in terms of like mental health or like sense of happiness when you made that shift? And how did like the writing process help it?
So mentally and emotionally, I think I've felt a lot of downs and a lot of ups. And I have a chapter in my book or a section where I'm discussing, there's a quote by Brene Brown that says, we are too busy to have our lives catch up to us. And I recognize that with nothing there, with nothing on my plate, I felt like my life was finally catching up to me, and I was really feeling that mentally, emotionally, physically, everything. It's like everything was stronger, everything was heightened. And with that, I cried a lot throughout, the entire year, but definitely like the first couple of months post quitting. I questioned myself a lot, and I think just recovering from burnout and having, histories and states of depression and anxiety, all of that was bubbling up and coming to the surface in a way that I just hadn't really made space for before in my life. And because of that, I think I was able to learn how to manage that more because I allowed it to happen. And I was more or less prepared for and even expected that to happen. I knew it was going to be difficult, and I knew this would probably happen just knowing my tendencies. So I kind of like created that space for me to be able to do that and to be able to manage that in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And just letting that be okay, and letting that letting that happen and not expecting myself to be happy and to have everything cured just because I quit my job and, like was traveling. And I think a lot of people think that's such a dream life. But I mean, yeah, it is in some way, but also like it's really, really difficult. And I was letting myself just let it be difficult and really sitting with that and letting that be okay was so much of that. Yeah. And writing definitely helped me get through all of that. Journaling has always been one of my mechanisms for getting myself through anything. And that's why I think, the book wasn't supposed to be so personal in the beginning. Like I had no idea what the book was going to be like until I was writing it and going through it. But I really didn't think I was going to get that personal thought-wise and feeling-wise. And I really just drew on my journals and the writing that I was doing to like take me through real time in that process. Yeah. Hi, Orpheus.
Fantastic. Any other questions, topics people want to kick out to the group?
Maybe I'll do like a little bit of leeway on journaling. You have other like anchor throughout your day outside of like, let's say, journaling? Because like when we're working, it's easy because like we have work. It's the only thing we have in the day, but do you just go with the flow or you have like other habits that grounds you in your day?
Yeah, so journaling is definitely one of them. And I would say meditation is also a big one for me. I've been meditating for like the past 5 or 6 years now, and it's always been a practice that has really grounded me. And definitely when I was traveling, it was easier to like have activities and be doing things, and that like filled my day in a way that not traveling obviously didn't. So when I'm not traveling, and especially like in the past 6 months, I had to kind of restructure my days and what that looked like. So I think my morning routine is really important to me as well. Just like waking up and writing and like moving and stretching and that kind of thing. And other habit wise, I like to, this is kind of meta, but one of my habits is tracking my habits. And I actually think that more than anything has been really helpful for me, just to like know what I'm doing. And I'm also like tracking my like mood and how that relates to other things. So I can go on a whole tangent on that later if you want. But I think just learning my own habits and learning my processes and really reflecting on that. Those are some of the cornerstones that I keep on coming to. Yeah, definitely self-reflection is huge for me and was so necessary throughout the entire year. Yeah.
Are there any things that surprised you? Like I know on my own journey, I've kind of been surprised at almost how much I've shifted or how much I've kind of gone away from the things I thought I wanted in my life. Did any of those things happen for you too?
I think so. I didn't have too many expectations for myself actually for this. Something that was surprising to me was how this affected everything in my life. Like I was very much expecting it to affect like my work life, obviously, and probably like my mental and emotional states of being. But I really didn't expect changes to really happen in my family or relationships or friends and just other aspects in my life as well, which I think just speaks to how holistic this is, and like being more secure in who I am and being just more aligned in who I am has also brought me more alignment in my relationships, in my family, in my friendships, and in my connections overall. So that was definitely something that I didn't expect. And then another one is just having people along for the journey as well. I didn't expect to be writing publicly or to like be meeting so many awesome people through writing and through what I'm doing. And it was very much like a personal journey or a personal decision. And I didn't think that I would really meet people along the way. It sounds silly now, but yeah, that's definitely a really, really good surprise in that way.
Does anyone else in the group have any experiences that kind of resonate with what Amy and I have talked about that they want to share or thinking about taking similar paths?
Yeah, I would love to hear them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely thinking about.
Let's get that video, Ivan.
Yeah, let's see if it works. Hey guys, so I'm Ivan. I'm Paul's mentee from.
You're my friend. We're just friends.
Okay. I think I've been promoted to friend now. Yeah, so I am 1 year into. I graduated last year, and I am 1 year into my job as an investment banking analyst, and I think there's definitely a lot that resonated with me in terms of your story and everything that you thought about. I think I'm having a lot of questions, so much that I don't even. It's not always the most clear about exactly what the next move is or what to even consider. But some of the things I'm thinking about is just work and career in general. What does it mean to have work that really speaks to me, makes me excited to wake up? Just questions around having impact, enjoying, liking my coworkers, and what kind of environment would kind of be conducive to that. So these are the things I'm thinking about, and I don't know if you can speak to any of them, but it'd be definitely helpful if you could.
Yeah, I can imagine that remotely this has been tough too.
Yes, it has. I think the hours just get longer, and there's I think remote works. During the first couple of months, there's like a little more flexibility. I think at work, even during your downtime, you're just scrolling through articles because that's all you can do. And then at home, you have a little more time just to even see your friends and family, even if it's for 5 minutes, just to talk to your parents, which are right in the next door. That's definitely something I cherish. But there's definitely no hard stop for working at home and for investment banking in general. And I think that it's definitely hard during the last few months and the working from home.
Yeah, I'm sure it kind of just all blurs together into this like non-stop, like maybe like sleeping for a slight pause. Yeah, wow. So I think, you're obviously on the right track, and even like thinking about these things and allowing yourself to think about these things, I think that's the first step. I think for me, whenever thoughts like this would arise, like having like what I described as that slow burning cognitive dissonance, like I just wouldn't allow myself to even question it. Like that would come up, the feelings would come up, like physical feelings of anxiety would arise, and these thoughts would arise. I'm like, okay, like this isn't my time to think about it. Like I'll think about that later. Or like, why am I even doing this? Like I should be grateful in my position and just, stick with it. So I think even just allowing yourself to be here and to, be talking to Paul and discussing these things and really giving that space is such like a great thing. And I wish more people would be allowing themselves to question like that. And if I could say anything, is probably just to keep on taking that tiny next step. And it doesn't have to be like this huge thing. You don't have to know, like, you don't have to decide to quit your job at any point or now or anything, but like, what is that direct next step that you can take? Like, whether it's like talking to someone, whether it's like writing about something you're interested in, or just setting like a small boundary around your work, whatever that looks like for you, or like taking a walk every day, like just to get your head out of the IB like environment for a little bit. Yeah. Do you have any other questions or thoughts around that? Or Paul, you want to chime in on that?
I think Paul's muted, but that was definitely helpful. Yeah, I think definitely I'm trying not to put so much pressure on solving this all at once, like this big decision. And just been talking to more friends and, looking at what else is out there. Because I think similar to you, when I was an undergrad, I was more had more blinders into like the career in finance and never really, looked into many other opportunities. But I'm realizing now, there's so many roles out there, and now it's almost the opposite effect where it's just a lot of information overload, and that's why it kind of leads me into what is it that defines work and impact that is going to help me narrow it down a little bit, just so that I feel like there is a little pressure on me just coming internally that I hope my next position or wherever I go next, it doesn't end up feeling like the same thing and like falling into the same patterns. And that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, something along those lines, I will say, actually, like, I really tried to learn how to enjoy where I was before moving on to the next thing. And I know this sounds a little bit like an oxymoron, but I realized I didn't love my job, but I knew that getting another job wasn't going to be like the cure, right? Like, I knew I wasn't going to just magically become another person when I was in the right environment.
You're much smarter than me. Took me like 5 jobs to figure that out.
Well, I was like listening to all these podcasts and like people who had quit their jobs, and like they were warning me of this. I'm like, okay, this is going to happen. Like, this is not going to happen. So I was really like preparing myself in that way. And even when quitting, I was like, okay, I know that I'm not going to just magically like be happy and like this is not going to solve all my problems just because I have all this freedom and everything. So I really made it a point to try to learn how to not be content, but like learn how to take a more just a more active approach in my own well-being, instead of letting my environment and letting my external circumstances dictate what I was thinking or what I was feeling. So that was a very active step that I took just in the moment. And obviously that's not to say like you have to stay at your job or anything like that, but like knowing you can leave it just because you want to and not because like you're being pushed out of it is also a really empowering feeling. And yeah, so that was really helpful, just to have that whole mindset shift and knowing that it wasn't the circumstances or the environment that was dictating who I was. And obviously like environment has a lot to do with it, and that's going to help and empower you in a way, but you can have more, just more, a little bit more guidance on like what you're looking for if you know like who you are already as well. And yeah, I know there's probably like so much out there right now, and like that makes you probably, or at least it made me seem like more lost than ever, because I'm like, oh, like the whole world is a possibility now, right? Like I never had these blinders off before. So something that also helped me was just reminding myself that I wasn't on a timeline, and it wasn't like I had to sign an offer in 30 days like before. I was on my own timeline, or like there is no timeline, and we're not late to anything, and like you're not too old for anything or too young for anything, and that was really empowering to me, because I mean, I'm always in this mentality like, oh, it's too late for me to do this, or like I should have done this like 6 months ago, and like I passed or the wave or whatever, right? Like, and just getting out of that mindset is really helpful, just to give yourself the time and the space to really not feel rushed in this process, and to be able to explore in a way that's meaningful to you.
Awesome. Anyone else want to jump in? We have like 5 minutes left. We could probably run over a little. Angie, did you have any comments or questions? I think Deepu has one more too.
Yeah, thank you, Amy, so much for sharing. Oh, do you want to go first?
No, Angie, go ahead.
Thank you. I am curious, like, what questions, reflection questions, will you ask yourself during your journaling? So I'm like 7 months into my solopreneurship journey, and I found out there is a huge discrepancy between what I really want to be, like what's the ideal state of being, and like as a social being, what do I want to, what kind of title or like names do I want to achieve? So I think my ideal being is really just chilling, reading Kindles, and like engaging in meaningful conversations. But when I think about how people will think of me, especially my family member, my in-law family members, or my not so close friends will think of me, I will feel like I need to achieve a certain type of like naming, or like leadership, or like just some labels. And it's really hard. Every time I journal, I will found a different sides of myself, but I never can take any actionable strategies that really transform my behavior. So just curious, what was your writing and ask yourself in your journaling?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Oman. Also, like, I completely resonate with all of that. Like, just I think I was really scared of judgment as well, with friends, with family, with strangers, with people in general. And something that helped me in writing was actually getting very specific as to my fears, and like naming names as to like, okay, I think that, for example, like I'm really scared that my aunt is going to think less of me because I now no longer have this position. And then I ask myself, like, okay, like, what's a situation that would arise through that? Like, okay, maybe we're in, it's completely arbitrary, I'm making this up, but maybe we're like in a family reunion, and like she like takes a stab at me or something, or like talks about my cousin who is this, and like is super proud of her. So I could kind of walk myself through a scenario, like a very specific scenario of what could happen. And usually I find is that the scenario probably isn't going to happen. Like, yes, it might, but then once I actually walk myself through it, I realize that I'm not actually as scared of it as I thought I was, or that whole like nebulous fear of judgment, when it's actually like broken down into like something very specific and nameable. That's not a word, but like something that can be named. That helps me recognize that, okay, this is the fear that's surrounding this, but like I'm actually okay if that happens, and I'll be prepared, and like this is my answer if that happens, like this is how I'll react. Or B, it's probably not going to happen, because like sure, my aunt like might think that, but like she probably won't actually say that, or things like that. And you might have completely like other thoughts around that, and other scenarios, or like more evidence that people might actually say and do things. But when I was actually like going through the evidence of what people would say, or like what people did, like I couldn't come up with much to actually deter me from what I was doing. Because at the end, I decided that I didn't care when I actually walked myself through all the different scenarios. I'm like, you know what? I really don't care about what they say or what they think. So it's going to be okay. And I think actually like putting myself through those emotions and through those thoughts allowed me to like process them in a way that allowed that fear to kind of dissipate because I put myself through that. And then secondly, the whole like ideal version versus like who you are now, I think, and write a lot about that. And something that I try to do is really break it down to the day-by-day moments. So I have this version of Amy that I aspire to be, and like I want to be like her. And sometimes like, so this is like really silly, but I think it's a trick that works for me. So I spell my name A-M-Y, right? That's my legal name. But this version of Amy is spelled like the French version of Amy. So like she's more sophisticated and like more whatever. So it's like A-I-M-E-E. It's like when I'm writing, like I'm writing about this version of Amy. So that's a different role, right? And so when I'm thinking about my day, I'm like, okay, what would that version of Amy do? And it's almost like, if anyone knows, like, what would Jesus do? Like the whole bracelet, right? So I asked myself, like, okay, what would Amy do? And in this moment, like, I have the power and the ability to make that decision in a way that lives up to that version. And in that moment, that makes me that version. So I think our ideal states and versions, it feels very like far away, but allowing yourself to really bringing it to the now and bringing that possibility to the now, that bridges the gap for me in that way.
Wow, thank you so much.
Or you can make like someone you admire, or like, I don't know, a role model, whatever you want.
I love this trick of the alternate name. I think this is my Chinese name persona. Xiaomi Bao.
Oh.
Only the Chinese speakers got that one. Deepu, you had one question. We haven't heard from Mariana or Orpheus. I don't know if you guys have questions. You don't have to have questions. But if you wanted to share something, kick something to the group, feel free to speak up.
So no, I was just about to say that so what he said really resonated with me. So I come from Indian traditional background. So even when I spoke to my parents today, my dad is asking for the background, is everything okay with this job? So there is always this pressure of having like a successful career and having a stable career, like especially in the Asian tradition and the Asian families. So like gave me a lot of space and time to think about, what I'm doing in my life. And I've always been interested in like drawing and writing. And I've always been interested in like searching for happiness and like reading and studying about happiness. So I just started doing it. I just started pursuing that interest. I started a newsletter called Visual Wisdom, and I started a Twitter page and started drawing and posting it over there. A lot of people started liking it. So without any sort of plan to make it a business or anything out of it, I just started doing something, and it really like, unleashed something within me. Started giving me more happiness while staying and doing in my, full-time job. So I think that, okay, doing something I love, doing them with the people I love, and if it helps someone else, that's like the magic combination for me. But I think ultimately there needs to be some kind of way in which you can sort of like monetize this, right? Because even if you look to other people, everyone's kind of talking about passive income and monetization. So now at this point, after you have written your book, do you have that sort of like pressure to, find that thing that will sort of, find that avenue for monetization and growth and, all those kind of things?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I kind of hate that question also, just because I wish that weren't the case, obviously. But I mean, even in terms of money, I'll get to the now and like what I'm thinking about in the next year, but just in terms of, yeah, I love the gift economy approach too. In terms of last year, I think really there's a whole mindset shift of when you allow yourself not to make money as well. And there's a whole identity shift around that. And I mean, I've been working and making money for myself since I was like 10 years old. And I've never stopped since then until last year. So that tie to your worth is, I mean, you can only imagine like what it does to us, right? And so once I stopped and just allowed myself to do things without money and really unbundling all of that, that allowed me to like explore in a way that I think you were talking about, just like, you know, doing things without expectation. So that's where I started. The book was never supposed to be a moneymaker or anything like that. Like if I wanted to continue making money, I would have just stayed in my job. So with that, I will say there is that shift now. I'm like, okay, is it a possibility for me to make a living with what I'm doing? Because ideally, I would just continue doing what I've been doing the last year and be okay financially. Like that's the dream, right? And obviously, like I'm okay right now because of savings and all of that, but that's going to run out. So in order to be sustainable, I have thought about different revenue strategies and what I want to do with that. And right now I'm thinking just like continuing what I've been doing in terms of like facilitation, like mindfulness, journaling, small groups, community, that kind of thing. I've been doing that for the last 6 months without much pay. And I'm wondering if there's a way to really to monetize that. So those are thoughts that are coming up now. Yes, it is painful still. But I think also just allowing myself to not do that. And it's kind of more fun for me. It's kind of like a game now. Like, oh, like if I can make money throughout this, and if I can somehow sustain myself, there's not that pressure in a way that I think was really forcing myself to do things that I didn't want to do before. Before, financial security was like the number one value that I made my decisions off of. And that completely shifted, right? So now it's more like, oh, like financial, that benefit. And obviously I'm in a very privileged position to be able to say this and do this. Now it's more so like either like going through like a gift economy or like exchanges or like value exchange. And that money is just really an added benefit. It's like the side benefit up to what I'm doing. And it's all kind of just a game and experimentation in that way. And that's not a great answer, I don't think, but those are just the thoughts that are coming up now around it.
That definitely resonates with my own journey. My first like 6 months I spent freelancing, and then I basically collected on an invoice in 2018 to kind of pretend like I made a decent amount of money that year. But I essentially spent most of 2018 like making below poverty wages, and it was like really painful. So it was like 12 to 14 months of like not making money, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. But it also flipped everything for me because I just started spending way less and living like a very like monastic living life. And life was good on very little. And that was very freeing. And I ended up like starting making money with several different creative things like a few months after that. And I don't know, maybe there's a link, but it's just kind of funny how those things happen.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the way I've kind of gone about it is like the more desperate I am for it, it's probably not going to come in that way. So So being able to free myself in a way that I don't think I really like had the means to do so beforehand. Like growing up in a low income family, like money was so important, and everything was kind of centered around finances. So to be able to feel freedom in this way and to feel like happy and content and just in a really good place, like living frugally and like living monastically, like you said, like that gives me a lot of freedom to do what I want to do. So yeah, that complete like mindset shift has been huge within the last year.